This is episode 372 of The Journey, a conversation on leadership, culture, and creativity. My name is Vidal, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity and the privilege that you give me to speak to all of us on a Monday, which is the 27th of January. So yesterday, I share with some of my journey that coming to United States back in 1990. I was immersed. I was, culturally transitioning and basically baptized into the world of sports like never before. I grew up with the sports. I come from a family that played a lot of sports, but coming to a place like United States, it's a little different just because of the resources and the opportunities to either be exposed or to practice. And eventually for me, got married and then having our kids, both of our girls, they played in the marching band in middle school and high school. So that implied that they participated in tons and a lot of football games. So we enjoyed their, seeing them perform and participate. But for me personally, it was very enjoyable also because I got to see sports. Football is a very, very attractive. Next week is football. In the game of football, there is a Super Bowl. So sports is all over the place. And then our son, which is the youngest, Josue, again in the middle school era, also engaged into the actual game of basketball. So basketball eventually has grown into our family where, hearing the news yesterday, we're coming out of church, the 26th, which is Sunday, and we're having lunch, and then Josue tells me, hey, have you heard, is this true? And I'm looking at social media venues, and there is the incident, the tragedy of a helicopter, falling down, where Kobe Bryant, one of the iconic figures of our generation, alongside with other individuals from young people, including a 13-year-old daughter, and other basketball players, apparently teenagers, and coaches and family. If I'm not mistaken, I think the total is 9 people tragically died yesterday, just on an instant accident, and took their lives automatically. Well, we have been in shock. Many of you know exactly who and what I'm talking about. And again, for us, it really hits home because, again, some of these individuals, and Kobe Bryant is one of them, that many people loved him. If you're a Lakers fan, the guy, what is it? 18, 20 years playing for the same organization, winning 5 championships. Very few people are able to do that in life, and this guy was able to do that. But more than anything else, for the sport component, the issue of death, the issue that he died 41 years of age, and then the issue of a daughter and many other daughters, for what we understand, parents, spouses, tragically also die in the incident. Well, all those things hit home for us because for us, sports has become very personal. Basketball, as much as I love basketball, for me, basketball now is my son. It's family. It's something that is relatable. So we go to basketball games, and as much as I enjoy the game and I'm critical of the game, I look at how people play and how coaches coach, and I just love to learn and analyze things. It eventually becomes, again, a family thing for us. So just to make the connection of a tragedy with the world of sports, even this weekend, we spent the entire day of Saturday just interviewing and speaking to coaches and universities and colleges, because Josue's dream and desire is to play ball at a college level. So, man, it's been a difficult, transition to see the world, evolving around such a tragedy. And I know tragedies happen all the time. People die all the time, and for me, I'm reminded because I'm seeing the pain. I'm only imagining the tragedy and the depth of the grief of some of these families. For us personally, some of you have heard this before, but a month ago, the 19th of December, we buried Mom, and tragically we lost her to cancer. I have 2 sisters, and both of them, they have lost their children, and they bury children. Families very close to us at church, they recently lost loved ones, and I'm speaking of children and spouses. So what do you do when you go through situations like this? How do you process the pain and the suffering and the tragedy of scenarios that they are irreversible? that there is no coming back, that they are in a situation where words can articulate the pain and the depth of the grief that they are facing. Well, for us, which we embrace a Christian worldview, we have to go back to the words of Jesus. And specifically yesterday, when I read basically the closing of a series that we did for the entire month of January, which is a series on the core values of the church, I spoke of the core values for a month within the perspective that the church is something that cannot just pass by, that eventually falls or fades away. And I'm saying this because we base the life of the individual, of either personally or corporately, which is the church, based on words that were spoken, based on a person that when he spoke, he created from nothing. Not only that because he's trustworthy, but eventually he's going to prove that what he said comes to pass. And specifically the phrase that I'm remembering, and I'm brought into this conversation because of what happened, and again this tragic situation of death, and especially with iconic figures, and how the world is mourning, and the world of sports is mourning the death of this 41-year-old guy. Jesus made a statement at the end of the conversation he's having with Peter, and the conversation goes into this component that he says, "You are Peter, and I will build my church." So he's giving Peter the understanding of who he is based on a very intimate conversation, but specifically he gives the purpose of his identity on a specific task or mission. And within this whole excitement of the things that Jesus said and the things that Jesus is going to do, he closes the conversation with something that I believe is transcendent. That believe, in my view, and again I said some of these things yesterday, is the understanding that he says that the gates of Hades, that although I'm telling you who you are, and you are not the result of fate or luck or accidents, that I'm telling you who you are, Peter. And by the way, my statement is not an indictment. It is not a loophole that is gonna make you immune from tragedy. You are about to face some of the most difficult things that you have ever faced in your life. You're about to see some of the things that people have never seen on the face of the world. And yet I'm going to build my church, but the price of the building of my church, I'm fixing to go through that calamity, tragedy, difficulty, and irreversible thing that is called death, based on that Friday. But I'm telling you that the gates of Hades will not prevail against it, because Sunday is coming. That's what Jesus is implying, although he's not going to say that openly, and Peter is not going to understand that, because nobody believed that he was going to come back from the death. But anyway, so Jesus dies on that Friday, and then Sunday comes around, and although the fight, the battle is real, in Hades, death and sin is real, and that's the reason why people die, because the world is broken, because Satan has a dominion over this land, over the globe, over people, but it's temporary, it's circumstantial. So for me, I got to go back into the relationship with the whole teaching of the Bible, that Jesus is going to experience what Genesis began at the beginning of the conversation. Genesis spoke and tells us that the serpent was going to strike the seed, the heel of the seed of the woman. So that Friday, again, Jesus speaking to Peter, but on that Friday when Jesus died, is a reminder to Peter and the disciples that there's a battle. And Hades, although is battling with the gates, and I'm always thinking about why gates. I mean, you don't go to battle with gates. I'm thinking in my mind that part of the implication, because of the resurrection of Jesus, that the battle that the church is facing, that the battle of the Christian is facing, that the battle, in this case, these families that go through the tragedy of the death of loved ones, is a battle that we do not fight towards victory. It's a battle that where hell, based on the resurrection of Jesus, hell is placed on a defensive mode, not an offensive mode. Implication that we as Christians, although we're in the battle, although this is real, although death is real, we face death from the understanding that death will not overcome the agenda, the people, the kingdom of God. And again, this is so hard to believe, especially when you are dominated, you are oppressed, you are overwhelmed with grief and pain. And this is why I believe that Jesus is not implying that we become immune when we believe his words. I think what Jesus is implying is that the same faith that is required for you to believe that you are Peter, speaking in verse 19, and for you to have the faith that I'm going to build my church is the same faith that is required for you to look at me, says Jesus, and relied on my trustworthiness, that I am reliable, that I'm able to deliver what is about to happen. So on that Sunday, when Jesus comes back from the death, and he reminds us that although we are in a battle and we do not fight towards victory, we fight from victory, yet we go through temporary situations where the context is painful, where the context seems to be irreversible, where the situation seems that the battle is being lost. Well, Jesus is going to go through that again. And on that Friday, he's going to literally confess and say, it is finished. So death is going to take a transitory victory over Jesus. But on that Sunday, Jesus is going to take a final victory over death. And I believe that when you go through life and you go through tragedies like this, based on the trustworthiness of Jesus, not on the accomplishment of the individual. And I don't have the time to go into the accomplishments of Kobe Bryant, but oh my goodness, this guy was pretty unique and amazing on accomplishing things. When in reality, our victory is not based on our behavior, nor our accolades or again, a resume. Is based on the words spoken by Jesus, on the words that he eventually becomes the expression, the incarnation of those words. That Jesus is not simply, Jesus isn't simply who he said he is, but Jesus is able to transfer to accredited, we use the word imputed, to bring into our lives everything that he did. And that's the reason why we believe that although we are in a battle, although Hades or hell is going to take a bite and is going to create a death, and we will experience death in this world, it will not overcome us. We are in the understanding that the individual, when physically the individual dies, is simply a transition. It is not the cessation of life. It's not the final experience for men, for those who have placed their trust in the person and the character of Jesus. Now, everything I just said to you, and if you have a chance to go back and read Matthew chapter 16, if I were to speak to any of the families that are going through tragedies like this, if I'm speaking into my own soul by reading the words of Jesus, when I think about the death of mom and the departure and this transitory, painful grief experience that we're going through, it's got to be based on a confession that Peter makes earlier in verse 16. I just read or memorized or recited to you verse 19, but in verse 16 he makes a confession that I believe is the foundation of that confession, because the confession, as needed and as critical as it is, meaning for you and I to believe, to say it, to sing it, to recite it, to pray these confessions, we have to understand that the confession that you are Messiah, you are the Christ, you are the promised one, you are the anointed, not me, but you. That's what Peter is saying. That means that you are the son of the living God. So it's in the context of family, in the context of a family member. On the very next verse, which is verse 17, he says, Peter, you are blessed because no flesh, no blood, no human ability gave you the revelation that you are professing and confessing. What's the point? That it is my Father, my heavenly Father, who owns, who rules over everything, gave you the ability to make that confession. So all that I'm saying is that as much as we believe that the church, the people of God, will not be overcome, that what happens in tragedy, what happens through suffering, what happens through what seems to be the irreversible, is simply the stage for us to be reminded that Hades, hell, death does not overcome these things. That the pain is temporary, that this is a transitory situation. Is it real? Yes, it is. Is it overwhelming? Yes, it is. So what do we do? We have to go back into the confession that although I don't feel like you're God, although I don't feel that you're Messiah, although I don't feel that you're in charge, I have to go back into Peter's confession that you are Christ, you are the Son of God, you are the Son of the living God, you are Messiah, you own your cosmic, authority remains true. And today I simply pray and ask for individuals that are going through this situation, that the same God who revealed it to Peter will reveal it to them, will reveal it to me, will make that revelation tangible and something that we are able to confess and say that Jesus is who he said he is. My prayer, my heart goes out to these families. And if you're going through anything similar to this, I just pray for you. I pray for this week to be the week that we are reminded that the gates of Hades will not overcome it. We love you guys. We thank you. And again, we hope that you have a wonderful rest of this week. May God bless you.